And here we are live once again with another episode of the Black Stitch Hockey Cast. As is the case, this is a nice little break right before Sunday Night Football over on NBC. And based on how this opening week of National Football League action has gone, we're definitely more compelling than any of the three games going on right now, all of which are at least a 2-3 score deficit. Yeah, I can say that the Broncos once again aren't living up to the reputation set by the Colorado Avalanche. Which is to be expected. And
from atop Angels, the Winds Arena in downtown Everett.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Hello. Yeah, a little bit of WHL preseason action going on my end. Definitely some good looks now already. Like I'm watching Everett right now, and just yesterday was like pretty big. Because Lyndon DuPont, of course, non-competitive setting, but he made his first CHL shift. We gotta look at the possible next big thing from that environment, with him being the most recent recipient of exceptional player status in the CHL. So that was cool.
That's the most different I've looked.
Where?
The power of new
Man,
phones.
I was gonna say, Damien, you got the new phone. Now it's time for you to find a way to get an actual goddamn microphone up in there. Maybe a little bit of noise canceling in the headphones. You know, there isn't as much bleed through like, some of us.
Yeah.
Before we dig into the more of the hockey side of things, got to give a shout out to Gerard Mayo for getting off to a 1-0 start to his career as the Patriots head coach. With Damien as my witness, and Mark, if he's listening to the stream, I just want to point out that I did call the Patriots winning this game on Friday night.
Yeah.
With no logic other than, it'd be real funny if somehow the Bengals just fucked that up on opening night and the Patriots figured out a way to win. And once again, I didn't bet on it because I'm a dumbass. I'm only ever right when my predictions have clout involved. Whenever money's involved, my luck tends to go the other way. Therefore, as a guy who likes clout more than riches through illicit means, I'm not a millionaire. And from that note, I think we're actually going to jump straight into Dev Leagues and straight into CHL.
Yeah.
Because that is the most happening event in the hockey world at the moment.
Yeah. At least in North America. I do have some Russia-related stuff, although I'll be looking lower on the pyramid than the KHL, because if you want to find out about the KHL, you can just read about my articles about Gazprom's teams, because that once you'll get plenty of perspective on every other team too, considering that's combined, I think, like 136 games worth of content between those two, not counting postseason, which, like, ironically, Sochi might actually make it this time, but whatever. So obviously, CHL, plenty of preseason activity. A noteworthy game after a very scary situation with the vehicular accident, in which fortunately no one was seriously injured. Cape Breton defeated St. John 10-1 in the queue for a nice little emotional bounce back there after the squad general managed by Sylvain Couturier. Of course, Sean Couturier's father had a pretty respectable professional career of his own. Definitely like rose to the occasion after a little bit of a what could have been a nightmare situation that was fortunately a crisis averted. Um, that was a couple days back. Very emphatic. 5-goal second period. Really remarkable stuff. Some noteworthy events yesterday, of course, as I was discussing when we were just jumping into it. In his in a non-competitive setting, of course, but Lyndon DuPont, 2027 draft eligible defenseman, played his first CHL hockey for the Everett Silvertips in the dub. Kind of a quiet, subdued thing that time around. But it was good to see like these are the first steps for what might be another historical career. We're talking like a guy who probably has like the most at minimum like the most impressive floor we've seen from a CHL defenseman since Aaron Ekblad's OHL you know stint in which he really had to like such an impressive profile, made such a big impression. um Let me take a look here. Just gotta find something real quick. Little hold on. I know what I'm doing wrong. Uh, let's see. Yeah. Oh, here we go. So for today, let's see. There's quite a few games on tap. Some of the noteworthy ones included Royan Naranda versus Valdor in the queue. Let's see. Valdor squeaked that one out 4-3 in a pretty close game, which was broadcasted on Facebook Live. So this is when I make like a pronouncement. Like it is difficult. I understand it is a disappointment to me sometimes that the CHL is kind of overlooked by like United States hockey followers, despite it still being in terms of volume the biggest dev environment for the NHL. But this is a good time of year where you can watch those games for free. Because a lot of them are being live streamed on their social media pages, and whether it be Facebook or like their YouTube channels, etc. Sometimes you see teams, particularly in the OHL, go all out and have it be like a high quality broadcast. That's also happening for this dub game right now. Although I believe that's also being at least simulcast on TV. With Wenatchee being up against Everett. And if you have the financial means, like CHL TV is available for American subscribers as well. So it's definitely a good investment. Nice. Everett just Wenatchee, sorry, got on the board just now at 3:40 for the first score of that game. But so there are ways, and it's definitely something I encourage. There is a bit of talent disparity in these leagues, but they're definitely worth watching for some of the high end talents there. Yesterday, Guelph was up against defending Eastern Conference champions in the OHL, the Oshawa Generals. It was a 6-5, very loosely played game, but I definitely have to commend the Guelph penalty kill, particularly anchored and driven by Jet Luchenko, really tapped into his inner Mike Richards because, like, you know, the kid was just like snuffing things out and using his speed to bring things like the other way. So the PK went 7 for 8 last night, and it was remarkable. Even though they came up on the wrong side of that game, like he did some amazing things, particularly when they were on a man down, which was often. The only time they surrendered a goal shorthanded was on a 5-on-3. So that was really remarkable. Something I'm sure assistant coach and PK supervisor with his NHL club, the Philadelphia Flyers, Brad Shaw, saw and just sort of smiled and nodded at. Because like that was just so. That was a master class in special teams play. Honestly, that was pretty good stuff. I'm interested. You know, this group is definitely raw, to put it one way. But you know, there are a lot of like 2007 born kids who might hit their stride very soon. And with a guy like Corey Stillman behind the bench for them as the head coach, with a great pedigree as a player, with 2 Stanley Cup rings under John Tortorella and Peter Laviolette, and having like had gigs in player development and both in an executive in a coaching role and having some success with the Sudbury Wolves before the 2019-20 season got shut down due to COVID protocol. Like he's definitely like someone who I can see really helping these young kids take steps in the right direction, maybe even actualize themselves during this campaign. We'll see. It should be interesting. Like I don't think we're going to spend too much time seeing Luchenko and Quinn Bouchain carrying pretty much the entirety of the load. But also today, after that little diversion of yesterday's action, let's see. Sudbury went up against Peterborough. Sudbury came out 7-4 victors in that one. Let me see what else. There was also, let's see, notably another big game on the schedule that I had eyes on. Unfortunately, like I didn't quite get the experience with that I was hoping for. Let's see, we're about halfway into Brandon versus Saskatoon's first period from what I last saw. Roger McQueen, a guy 25 eligible who I was hoping to see, was not in the starting lineup for this. But, you know, another, like Saskatoon were phenomenal last year. And some of the guys on Brandon, like, you know, another situation where, like, the roster depth kind of isn't so great, but there are guys worth keeping an eye on in that team that, you know, have, like, good skill sets that maybe are hindered a little bit by the environment that they're in. So I thought that was cool. But that's enough for the C for now. Moving on to USHL, they've had their preseason going on. I think the most noteworthy thing was looking at Czech import Adam Binak, another big name in this 25 draft class. Like McQueen, also a center, but totally the opposite in physical build. McQueen is like the Lindros physical profile, whereas Benak is like somewhere like in like the Martin St. Louis category, but if he had the sort of PK effectiveness of whether it's someone like a Mike Richards or like a Brian Rolston, because like the kid's 1v1 defensive capabilities are freaking phenomenal, and it helps them on those shorthanded situations a lot, especially when it comes to like, you know, them maintaining possession and keeping the team pinned in their own zone, which is like, you know, really the best form of defense there is when you get down to it. But he, in his USHL debut, again, non-competitive environment, Benak had a 5-point night. So I imagine, like, if he has that sort of level of dominance in him this year, like, Youngstown is probably going to pivot immediately back to being the same sort of competitors they were in the 22-23 season when they took the Clark Cup home. Like, I think they're going to have a big turnaround from what they had last season. And I'll do some quick updates on the MHL over in Russia. We're a few games into their season. SCA 1946, always a relevant dev environment. Even though uh, when it gets to the big club, the way that SCA handles their youngsters is a little atypical in that, they often don't give those guys like big minutes within their own ranks. But their ultimate goal is like to send these guys to the NHL and have them do that once they've proven that they're one of the best players in the K. We saw it with Michkov. That's probably going to be the aspiration with Ivan Demidov as well. Scott 1946 is at the top of the gold division currently with 6 points after 4 games. And over in the silver division, rival franchise in the form of Krasnaya Armia Moskva, of course, a MHL affiliate of CSKA Moscow, is at the top of the silver with 6 points in 3 games. I've been very impressed with Ilya Paltov, particularly, who the Flyers drafted in the later rounds this year. He's had some pretty productive performances to this point. Really good work by Ken Hudikov, our Russian scout, in finding that diamond in the rough. It should be interesting to see his trajectory because, you look at it and it's like he's got a pretty impressive and dynamic skill set. So, his ceiling is probably a lot higher than what his draft positioning suggested, and I'm really excited to see where this goes. I won't be all in on the MHL this year or anything like that, but there are definitely narratives that I'll be keeping an eye on, and that's definitely a prominent one. Should be pretty cool to see where that goes and what the competitive landscape of the league looks like this year. And I think that's all the most important stuff for dev leagues this week.
Oh, yeah.
It was a cool weekend for U.S. Hockey where they inducted 4 players into the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame. You know, good old former Penguin, former Duck Matt Cullen getting in. Kevin Stevens, also Brianna Decker, who, again, you look at how far the game's grown for women's hockey. It's been great. She's phenomenal. And Major Fred Coughlin, who also had a huge impact in the Midwest in the game and its growth. So and I believe they inducted a team too. I think it was the 2002 Paralympic sled hockey team. So big. I liked all the inductions, growing the game, and we talked about how like U.S. hockey is growing and looking at the depth camps and just everything that's been going on the last 10, 20 years. It's great to see all these people who did influence and inspire getting credit, even if one of them was a OG OG on and off the ice, but Kev Stevens is a beauty. Love him. Crucial on 2 of those Penguins Cup teams. So U.S. Hockey.
Yeah, it's been an interesting time for um been an interesting time in general for hockey, which is, yeah, I saw the Kevin Stevens thing and proceeded to not touch it on social media because I can't talk about Kevin Stevens without bringing up alleged incidents involving Kevin Stevens off the ice. But hey, man, congratulations to Kevin Stevens for being acknowledged by somebody for his on-ice performance instead of his off-ice performance. It's always a good sign,
Yeah.
especially with, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. very quiet week for a lot of the NHL. Obviously, the Jeremy Swayman standoff continues. I enjoyed within about 5 minutes before hopping onto this live stream. I think my favorite moment on Elon's platform is, why don't the Bruins do something brilliant like trade Jeremy Swayman to the Senators for Linus Ullmark? Bang, problem solved. And credit where it's due.
Yeah.
That's some.
Yeah.
That is some like that is some peak spit and chicklets logic that the Chicklets boys didn't put out, and I just really wanted to appreciate that. Also, a problem that I'm having today as I scroll through Elon's platform is as I continue to read up on the next Spinal Tap film and Spinal Tap's future outputs, once I saw that Greg Bissonette is doing drums for that project, every time I scroll past Paul Bissonette, I get confused as to why is the drummer for Spinal Tap talking about hockey. And that's been a problem I've had all day, and I hope that problem spirals into the season. Because, a little ain't enough for Paul Bissonette.
Oh, nice. Just thought I'd provide a quick score update in the dying seconds of the second period. Saskatoon just tied up their preseason matchup with at 3-3 on a pretty sick rush goal. Like the speed and skill combo there was pretty sick. And this is a pretty well produced. This is one of the best produced CHL games I've ever seen ever. And it's like freaking preseason game where you could honestly tell me that it was in the double digits and I'd probably believe you. So good for them for going all out, I suppose. Oh man.
Yeah, one of the cool moments too from opening football weekend was seeing former Calgary Stampeder Alex Singleton coming out honoring Johnny Gaudreau wearing his Flames Gaudreau jersey. So that was so awesome to see.
For sure, yeah. I had just seen that a little while ago, which was a nice touch. Also not to be lost in the value of Alex Singleton pulling up in the Johnny G jerseys, the fact that he also played for the Philadelphia Eagles for the last couple of years. So really, prior to his signing with the Denver Broncos, has been very much aligned with the Gaudreau culture.
Yeah. Well, it's also good, he didn't show up in handcuffs. I still, blown away by that. He's still,
I think the worst thing about that situation with Tyreek Hill, and this may be one of the first times I get myself in trouble, and one of the first times Christian ever is aligned with law enforcement in any capacity. But man, I don't know if law enforcement acted out of pocket there. That's not for me to decide. They have an internal investigation for that. I'm not touching that with a 25-foot pole. Whether or not Mr. Hill committed a traffic violation once again, I'm not going to speak to whether he did or he did not. But I will say, if he did commit what he was accused of doing with his traffic violations, in recent event, like in light of what happened with the Gaudreau brothers, I think it is a very poignant point in time to remember that motor vehicles are a fucking deadly weapon if used incorrectly in high-density traffic areas, such as downtown Miami, 1 block away from Hard Rock Stadium, where this domestic incident that Hill himself was involved in this morning. It takes a certain level of self-reflection to realize that perhaps people who use motor vehicles recklessly in densely pedestrian-populated areas should be held to a standard of fucking responsibility and not think that, oh, they're only doing this to me. Like, I don't know, man. There really needs to be a lot of improvement in the American mind about how dangerous vehicles really are. And, like, for people to think that that was an overreaction, which it might have been, allegedly or not, people really do forget that, reckless driving and speeding in densely populated areas with a lot of pedestrian and cyclist foot traffic is an incredibly dangerous thing to do. And I find it very odd that Mr. Hill decided to make a mockery of everything that occurred this morning during a touchdown celebration. But hey, what do I know? In the words of Terrell Owens, to be fair, he isn't a role model.
Yeah, you know who was a big adherent to that mentality too was Charles Barkley, because like he was very much on record as like we shouldn't be people who like kids look up to because most people can't do what we do. So like, really, what is like the point of us setting some sort of moral standard?
I mean, yeah. Like, I kind of look at that whole situation and, like, let's be real. If anybody at this point in their life is still using Tyreek Hill as some semblance of a moral standard before this incident, like, hey, man, if you want to follow his training regimens, the way that he got to become one of the fastest men alive, one of the most prolific receivers in NFL history, like, hey, if you want to look up to Tyreek Hill, the athlete, go for it. Because you have to be that talented to still make an 8-figure yearly income despite some of his transgressions off the field. But
Yeah,
hey, man, what do I know?
the Panthers were there too, weren't they? To celebrate opening day at Miami. I think they were at the stadium starting the home game.
Who was sorry?
The Florida Panthers.
They might have been. I mean, it's definitely an interesting time to be around the Miami football organization. What's also not lost upon Christian in this situation is I really enjoyed watching my Jaguars do what my Jaguars do, which was find a way to pull defeat from the jaws of victory as they're so famous for doing. Really proud of them for finding a way to fucking lose that game. I like that my two favorite teams across both sports have a pretty impressive history of doing this difficult strategy of disappointing their fan bases in the most spectacular of ways. I also like the fact that we've entrusted both of our teams to guys named Trevor, who just, haven't been able to get us there since they've been drafted. It's fucking beautiful, man. Fucking beautiful.
I was gonna say, at least with the Jags, you know that they're not gonna have to blow it in games up.
Yeah, man. To be fair to the Jaguars, they are probably, for a team that makes the playoffs as infrequently as they do, they tend to do a lot of damage when they get there, as opposed to the Anaheim Ducks that have an impressive track record of getting up to 3-2 series leads with home ice advantage and somehow finding a way to not make it out of the round. Luckily, in the Trevor Zegras era so far, I've got to give Zegras credit. He's done, unlike Ryan Getzlaf and Corey Perry, he hasn't blown 4 consecutive 3-2 series leads. I mean, yeah, sure, he's accomplished it by not making the playoffs. But hey, man, not losing in the playoffs is not like, at least with the Ducks in the Zegras era, I haven't been disappointed. Every year I go in and expect us to win 20 games or less, and we might win like 24. So actually, like, unlike the Getzlaf era, the current era in Anaheim Ducks hockey, like, I'm pleasantly surprised because I expect us to do so much worse.
Oh, man.
Hmm.
Yeah.
There's one thing I
And
wonder. Like I think about now, you have in a vacuum. The worst part about the Seneca injury is that his like, well, we probably should have seen it coming anyway. But like, as is, his matter like of Dev was like so delicate in the necessity of the way that it had to be handled. And now you have to bank on Dev that he's not going to get because he's going to miss like 2 months. at most, and at a minimum a month and a half. But it's like with this happening so frequently, uh, with their U23 guys, can we finally start to maybe question like if there's like a conditioning problem within the org itself? Because like when it happens this often, you kind of have to ask the question if it's not just tremendously bad luck.
Yeah.
I definitely think there could more. I think the chances of it being an organizational issue are higher than 50%. But I do want to say that I do think that there is a trend where we are starting to see a bigger uptick in general of U23 prospect injuries across, the league. Like I think of Matthew Poitras, Boston last year, Fantilli missing time, Bedard missing time. Like we're seeing a lot of injuries in the last really 2 years that I can remember of guys drafted over the last 3 years missing substantial time. Obviously, the Ducks are definitely probably the most dev MGL following our camps, which is definitely concerning, i.e. Drysdale, Zegras, now Seneca, Carlson at points last year, Zegras last year. Yeah. But, like, we're definitely seeing, I think, an uptick. I
Yeah,
think a lot of this is a hot take. I'm already going to open with that statement. I'm really going to blame Connor McDavid and Austin Matthews for this. And you're like, how is it their fault? And I think it comes down to the way that their immediacy of impact alongside guys like Jack Eichel, Aaron Ekblad, and Patrick Laine were able to take the league by storm in the middle of the 2010s, where I think organizations are looking at their development models with their own prospect groups and thinking, how can we fast track our dev? What did these organizations do with these guys that allowed them to, be immediate impact players? So I think U23 prospects across the league are getting thrust in there with the expectation that they have to make that impact immediately. And I think their agents are potentially playing into it. Teams are playing into it now that, courtesy William Nylander also has some blood on his hands with this. Being the guy to really flip the narrative on contract negotiations for players coming out of their ELCs to, instead of guys getting paid in their late 20s, actually getting that big money in their first contract. So now we have the McDavid, Matthews, Laine, Eichel, Ekblad model of 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds fucking taking the league by storm, but also because a guy like Nylander who did it at 20, these guys are now pushing themselves of, holy fuck, dude, I can make $8 million a year at 22 if I do all the right beats. And in turn, you're seeing guys probably pushing themselves harder in the gym, not conditioning for longevity, but for results, and just their bodies not being able to take it, and guys are getting injured.
yeah. I think if you're gonna indict two teams that having like drank the Kool-Aid and committed to it too much, like I think the Bruins and Ducks might actually be the worst perps because like with Patra, like there was actually a track record established of that specific injury having occurred at least twice with some of their younger guys in the preceding 2 years. So it's like or a handful at least. Like so, there are some teams that have like an even worse handle on it than others. But yeah, like uh, I mean, it's like I it's actually funny how much this is mirroring the NBA with how much of like the sports science has gotten more advanced, but the way that we approach the player dev and preparation has caused injuries to go up even further. Like even when it's not as something as significant as that, you're seeing things like muscle pulls and tears happening way more often than they should, and things like that. When those sort of things like were never an issue. The biggest threat to player safety back in the day used to be other players more than anything. Like before the league completely reevaluated how physicality can be present without guys trying to murder one another. Like that was really like I think Bettman when they even just like I think the superstars like Sidney Crosby particularly were what philosophically altered how things were treated. But the first time like head contact was even so much on the books as a rule was because of Mark Savard. And like the Bettman's declaration was that, like physical play will not be compromised, but we can remove these sort of plays and these sort of injuries from the game while still maintaining that. But it's like the sport is not really that much safer. You're not having things with like as many long-term, oh, this will completely ruin your quality of life complications as much. And even when those happen, they aren't handled by cops the way they should. But like things that are affecting guys' careers are happening at an alarming rate, and it's bad.
Yeah. One guy I have to give credit to, though, who kind of avoided it is Nick Suzuki, because we look at Suzuki, and I mean, I feel like he gained a lot of size, at least weight fast, like muscle mass. But when you look at him, I mean, he played the last 3 seasons every single game. The year before that, COVID, I mean, he still played 56. I think he missed 11 his first year. But even when you look at his point production, like he's increased with every season, where last year he got to like 77 and 82 games played. So Nick Suzuki really is like a shining example of, I feel like a young player who has done this. And again, obviously coming in doing 41, 61 points. Obviously, yes, it's not McDavid, it's not Austin, it's not any of these guys. But like looking at how well he's grown physically, conditioning, and he's especially on the Canadians, where when we look at, like you're saying, certain organizations where we're seeing a lot of these young players getting hurt, and obviously again, Cole Caulfield, obviously he's been done. And a lot of that roster the last couple of years, I think the Canadians and the Ducks were like the 2 most like missed games from player injuries. So it's like it is impressive to see in a team that we've seen a lot of that happening. That Nick Suzuki being seeing all those growths and stuff, still seeing that he's healthy, and I'm not jinxing him in any way, but I just want to highlight as him being one of the guys I can actually think of.
I mean, there are definitely guys who didn't suffer from. I mean, the number of guys impacted by this is obviously going to be substantially less than the guys who aren't. I mean, if you think of every prospect in the league, I mean, Nick Suzuki's more of a fucking outlier in this capacity to the fact that I don't think the guy's missed a single fucking game since coming up to the NHL in general, which, I mean, that in and of itself is endemic of just good conditioning, that's endemic of maybe not pushing himself as hard as, you look at Nick Suzuki's dev curve realistically from his time at Owen Sound to his, brief stint with Guelph to Montreal. Like, Suzuki also had a long dev curve. Mainly also, like, probably because, like, Vegas never had any intention of him ever playing there. And also, like, Montreal just kind of let him ease into the lineup because there was legitimately zero expectations. And despite the fact that there were zero expectations, this dude played in the fucking Stanley Cup final, which is really weird to think about, that Nick Suzuki has played in the Stanley Cup final. Not only that, he had 16 points in 22 games in that playoff run. Fascinating.
The parallels between him and Mikhail Bridges are like super significant the more I chew on it.
Also just got an update from the PWHL that the logo reveals will be occurring at 10 a.m. tomorrow Eastern Daylight. Eastern. We're in EDT right now, yeah. 10 a.m. tomorrow. Virtual press conference, which I hate for them. Why can't we do this in person? Oh, wait, we don't pay the players enough to do this in person. I answered my own question. Which brings me to something PWHL-wise that I was chewing on writing my PWHL Minnesota article earlier today. Oh, yeah. I was thinking long and hard about Ken Klee and the allegations against him and the things that he said. And, like, the sound bites that are allegedly against him, blah, blah, blah. And I thought about it, and as I read the things he said, and we know that he was heavily inspired by Pat Burns, who himself was not the most, probably feel-good coach in the room. So Ken Cleese saying I was influenced by Pat Burns right after they won the championship, and then all the allegations that were in the windfall after, none of it fucking surprised me. And then I sat there and I thought about it. And I've read I've read a lot of Twitter content, I've read a lot of responses to Ken Cleese's antics. And I realized something. People are like, oh, it's because women are soft. No, completely wrong. That's not why these players are offended. I boiled it down to something real fucking simple. And we've seen it this offseason with Minnesota. The average player salary in the PWHL is about $56,000 a year. And it really boils down to the problem with Ken Clee is not one player in the PWHL is paid enough to deal with his bullshit. Yeah. Nobody making $60K a year in the day-to-day wants to deal with a shitty boss. Who the fuck wants to work a job for a boss that treats them like shit, to do a job that physically destroys your body and limits you getting into a higher paying career path with a better 401k and health benefit options? The answer, no one. And people are like, well, Kendall Coyne-Schofield defends him because his coaching tactics work. And Kendall Coyne-Schofield has actually built a career where she's making probably $100,000 plus a year in endorsements and salary. So wait, the player who can't just go get a new job that pays slightly more supports him, and players who can literally go use their Ivy League master's degree to make more than $60K a year don't want to play for him. Like, this all came to me writing that article of, this is the problem. Ken Clee wouldn't be a problem if PWHL players just made more money. Like, I think that is effectively what this boils down to.
I mean, I feel like the other thing too, though, and like when we look at like brand recognition, which is honestly what the PWHL has really tried to build itself on, as opposed to a lot of previous leagues, besides other things that they're building on. But like, it's one of those things where like, you look at the Minnesota like championship merch, and it wasn't good. So then a lot of people returned it, and it's one of those things where it's like, you wanna put a great product out there. You want everything, like all of your values and everything to align. And the thing is, it's like, again, to make more money, to grow the game, merchandising has to be on point. And it's one of those things where it's like, I mean, obviously, again, tomorrow's a very big day for the PWHL merchandising because logos, everything.
I'm gonna stop you there, Damien, solely on account of the fact you are mansplaining merchandising to a guy that runs a merchandising warehouse.
I'm just for the whole experience for whoever is what. That is where I'm trying to open up to and give it where you can have have a response. But I'm just saying, like, going off of that contingency.
Apologies for my body language there. Jackson Jacobson just put up Brandon 4-3. We know how high I am on that kid, but keep going.
I mean, yeah. The problem with PWHL merchandising, with the championship stuff with Minnesota, is the fact that nobody QC'd the embroidery on those hats is fucking unbelievable. Like, I don't even know, because the fact that those shipped, like, with the decorator who printed those not doing proper QC on that, horrible. And, like, that's not even on the PWHL. I can already tell you that, but the fact that the PWHL is going to, took the windfall because the decorator that they trusted to do a premium merch piece didn't QC them, because we all know that the PWHL doesn't handle the shipping of any of their merch. Like, nobody does. There's a reason, that Fanatics has been handling, with the exception of anything out of a team shop, everything for pretty much every major sports league. Like, people are like, oh, Fanatics manufacturing quality shit. Fanatics doesn't even fucking make this shit. Like, Fanatics just outsources it to another manufacturer and just handles the distribution chain or mainline at this point. Like, The fucking manufacturing is just a subsidiary of their own entity at this point. But to the credit of Fanatics, their QC is also bad, but it's not as bad as people think it is. Because in the case of Fanatics, they're probably shipping, like, bar none, 8 figures of merchandise a year. Like, Fanatics is moving 10 to 100 million pieces of fucking merchandise in a given year. You're going to have things that slip through QC when you're at that scale. You're going to have, if Fanatics fucks up 10,000 items in a year, that's within, and I'm a little off tangent here for this podcast. This is more what I do for a day job. Nevertheless, in lean manufacturing, you're going to have an acceptable amount of defects due to profitability. And Fanatics will always replace shitty print quality. Like, that's just how this all works. In terms of the PWHL, though, whoever their manufacturer is, and I'm not sure who it is or who their distributor is, and I'm not going to email the league because they're not going to get back to me with the recent events that happened with their championship merch. But, like, that is the entity that has fucked this up. We know that Bauer's handling this rollout. Like, knowing that Bauer, and they just picked up another large women's line to handle some of their manufacturing as well with a new line I saw from Heidi over in the PW fan club's page talking about this. So, like, PWHL is blissfully aware that their decorators and their manufacturers and their distributors that they used in their inaugural season fucking dropped the ball and fucked them over. And that's why they're moving to different manufacturers. Whether or not they stay with the same distributor is a whole nother question. And I am probably the only person in North America who would give a shit about a press release about it, because I'm the only person who cares about the specifics of it. But I think tomorrow's going to go well for them, assuming that the team names and the logos don't suck. And even if they do suck, if one of the 6 logos is bad, it's probably actually good for the PWHL. Because, like, look at the Gorton's Fisherman Islander jersey. I mean, the thing was fucking hideous. But people love it. They're nostalgic for it. Because if you're so bad, like, there's an acceptable margin for shitty uniform design that it becomes iconic and classic. So the PWHL can afford for one of these 6 teams to fuck up for the publicity and sales that comes with an awful jersey and logo. I just hope it's not Boston. Sorry, that is my 2 trades of this company and what I do for a day job overlapping for once. I apologize for the tangent.
It's good insight. You get one of those, the more you know, rainbows.
Hey, man, it's the only time knowing things about lean manufacturing and merchandising has ever come in handy on this podcast.
So far.
You are right about that, and it also helps, when we try to sell hats like this, that we can come in at a more competitive price than all of our competitors because we understand the flow of how these things get fucking made, which is how I can sell this hat for $20, knowing that everybody else is going to sell it for at least $25. Great deals, people. Great deals. Speaking of great deals, any KHL content that you'd like to add this week, Liam?
Nothing too big aside from what I've been writing about, because it is so, like, in the early phases. Let's see. Well, just do a quick rundown of today's score lines. Neftik and McNeesnikovsk, also known as the team with the bear, had scored a pretty big upset win over defending champions Metallurg Magnitogorsk with a 2-0 victory. So that was pretty cool. Salavat Yulevufa defeated Tractor Chelyabinsk 2-1 in a shootout today. Cisco Moscow had some action against Admiral Vladivostok, winning 6-2. And Severstol Cherepovets went up against Kunlun Red Shark, came forward 4-2 victors. Today, tomorrow, today for them, games on tap include Avangard Omsk versus Akbars Kazan, Beres Astana versus Amur Khabarovsk. Notably, the latter president of operations is Alexander Mogilny, the continuous Hockey Hall of Fame snub, for no real good reason at this point. Torpedo Nizhny Novgorod, head coached by Igor Larionov, to brilliant developmental success. We'll be up against Automobilis Yekaterinburg. And as I've declared, Vitiaz Moscow region and Sochi will be up against one another, and as well as Lokomotiv Yaroslavl versus SKA, St. Petersburg. And lastly, on the schedule will be Spartak Moscow versus Dynamo Minsk. For a quick CHL score update, preseason, Everett Silvertips are up 2-1 on Wenatchee. They had some really good special teams play in that. Their power play looked pretty good. There were times where they were cycling where it didn't really seem to have any sort of productive end, but they looked strong overall. There was a point on one of their penalty kill shifts also where they looked like they were the team with the man up. So that was pretty sick. The one thing I omitted from my updates was, because I was juggling a few things there, was that their final scoreline against Everett's final scoreline against the Seattle Thunderbirds yesterday was 5-3. So what's it called? Landon Dupont started off his CHL career with a dub, so you like to see that. Should be, I really think if they stay healthy this year, which was like their big obstacle when it came to like the postseason, I think they're going to be a much more competitive and enduring squad than they were last. I don't think Dupont single-handedly is going to be like the overwhelming difference maker, because he is going to be good, but like with the defenseman, it's going to as great. He's a 15-year-old prodigy, and I respect that. It gets like shooting accuracy and like his offensive weaponry are just otherworldly. But it's gonna be a long time before we see like that kid at even like a 75% version of what he's gonna become. But like the squad overall, like their defensive core is absolutely outstanding. So I'm interested to see what they do. But with regards to, I'm gonna provide like a full-fledged individual update on Jackson Jacobson here. So like. He's got a 3-point game going with a +2. It's pretty remarkable. Like, when we saw him in like both preseason and during his like affiliate stint, as like, they give the cup of coffee to those guys with the limited number of games they're allowed to play in. He's just been dominant and efficient as well. Like, he picks his spots well. Like, he's racks up goals and, regularly tally points, and it's not on a lot of shots on goal either. Like, he's just very like he's clinical and he's got the flashy skill as well. So like I've always said that he's the narrative around him is subdued right now because he doesn't have the same hype as around him as Dupont did due to the exceptional player status, which he did deserve. But like Dupont is another. I mean, Jacobson is another kid where, like, he's just, you kind of have to sense something because he's been so dominant against every, like, age group that he's played against. And now he's, like, regularly punching above his weight in the WHL as a kid who doesn't even turn 16 until December. So it's like, I really think that if we see a competitive Brandon squad, it's going to be like, having that strength down the middle between both him and Roger McQueen, totally different players with different attributes, but they're having like a 1-2 center combo like that is like so valuable to a team's forward depth. And I think they're going to be better than they were last year and better than people expect probably. Well, I'm pretty excited for that. And that's like pretty much all of my league updates for this week. Short-handed goal for Everett. They're now up 3-1. Man, this is just an absolute special teams masterclass right now. I'm loving this.
Oh, yeah.
Always a good PK. Like watching this in Guelph like the last couple of days has been pretty exciting. As rough as that experience was at times.
Which brings me to, do we have any talking points before we roll into Before we roll into the big finish, sorry, I'm in the middle of prodding Kyle Cushman to see if he has any information about future PWHL merch. But the brand I was forgetting about, credit to our boy Kyle, my boy Kyle Cushman. I deal with him a lot lately. It's weird, I know. Peace Collective will be doing a launch for PWHL. Still unsure who the distributor is going to be for the season, though. That's probably not being even kept tightly under wraps. That's probably just because literally nobody besides me gives a shit.
Hmm. One thing I've been thinking about, like, you know, what version? Like, it's hard to gauge for like with recent events, especially, and like with the volatility of his individual situation in the teams. But like, what version of Patrick Laine do you guys think we're going to see this year in Montreal?
I I think that we're going to get. I, I think Line is going to be very strong offensively. I think as the year goes along, he's going to get heavily vested into the 200-foot game. Just because I think, this is the first time in his career where I think he's walking into a situation with an established coach who's player centric,
Yeah.
a locker room that's clearly very tight knit and very welcoming to guys. Winnipeg was always, Paul Maurice is Paul Maurice, and we all know that locker room was questionable at best at times, and like Columbus when he was there was very chaotic in terms of guys coming and going, coaching change, and consistency. So I think him finally getting into what I deem to be a healthy organizational culture in the room. Outside the room, no. In the room, I think a healthy culture is going to let us see really the best version of Patrick.
It's actually funny, like how you know, much the Canadians mirror their arch rivals, the Boston Bruins, in that respect, where the dressing room is by and far the best part of the organizational culture. And like, this isn't even the worst version of the Canadians front office that there's been in recent memory. I think the Mark Bergevin era takes that by like a long margin, especially when it got to the point where the team it was pretty. I remember it kind of being covered that the team had basically given up on Michel Therrien and towards the like beginning of the 16-17 season when their win streak finally snapped with that absolute blowout loss, because they were like bordering upon a mutiny. And to say nothing of other incidents like the whole his handling of the Guy Lafleurs and like John Beliveau not being allowed into the dressing room because of them being a distraction, and the Logan Mailou situation as well. But like, there's still a lot of dysfunction. But like, looking to the Bruins as a parallel, like I think guys can thrive as long as the guys that they're interacting and working with on a regular basis are guys that they gel with, which seems to be the case in that environment. So like I
Sir,
think what
I apologize. I always call him Logan Mayo for very obvious reasons. It's the first time I've ever actually heard somebody say his last name correctly.
um,
Sorry.
that's not good. Uh, let's see. We are now at 4-2 Everett. Wenatchee had a very interesting in tight goal that was very peculiar, but Everett had a response pretty quickly. Um, but like, so I think having that to his advantage is going to serve Line very well for him thriving and prospering on an individual level.
Yeah. Well, I think too. I mean, when you look at it, I mean, what he went through last year, and putting your mental health and everything first, and coming out on top, because ultimately that's what he did. They cleared him between that and injury and everything, and he came back. And I feel like just with how everything, the whole off season where everything kind of happened, and obviously with what happened with the Gaudreaus and stuff, I think I think he just has so much fire and so much motivation this season And like you guys were saying with the environment, the thing is now he's older, right? So he's in a little bit more of that veteran leadership position. And when we look at a lot of the kids that are in that locker room, who are still young, obviously looked up to Lane, looked up to a lot of these other guys. So I think his voice is going to really carry in that locker room. And I think this is really the first chance where we're going to really see Lane, kind of be that mentor, be that leader in different ways. And I think it's going to be a great, great environment for him. And I think, just with Montreal in general, getting him back to Canada, I think is awesome too, because I mean, obviously when he was in Winnipeg, that's where he played his best hockey. And I think going back to Montreal, I mean, there's something about hockey in Canada, and I think it's everything for him is going to be a good fit.
Yeah, I mean, there's also something about getting the fuck out of Ohio.
There's only like one thing I kind of side-eyed at is that he is in a situation where the media scrutiny and like the market is like a lot more demanding than they were where he was before. Especially with like, Columbus, like their expectations have been low, and there were other things like, to take the heat off of them. Because aside from the fact that they had to deal with the Babcock situation before the year started, you clearly saw that Pascal Vincent was totally out of his depth as well. So that attracted some heat too. Whereas like we've seen it time and time again where like the Montreal press, like, much like Toronto, is just very like hyper focused on individual players. And like with the Canadiens are like, the rebuild is like entering year 3 at this point, to where like you're questioning like when you're going to take the next step forward. So like there's like even some who expect that this is the year where they fully turn it around. So that's the only thing that's really the other side of the coin where it isn't quite as glowing. But we'll see how it happens. Like I definitely think he's better equipped to handle that sort of thing than he's ever been, and his healing process does seem to have gone really well for him. So I'm definitely hoping for the best.
I fell down my rabbit hole.
Oh yeah?
I think that line change has been handling a lot of the PWHL's fulfillment. At least for their women's line. Still don't know who's doing the predominant of their overarching merch. Interesting. I will continue to dig down this rabbit hole though, until I find, and I may never find it out, but the information's got to be there somewhere. And on that note, I think we should roll into the big finish.
Yeah, so this is something I've been thinking about for a while now, and like I think that it's time to bring it forward, because now I really have something a way to really contextualize it now that we're knocking on the door. It's interesting to note that an independent, or as some might say, unsanctioned former Tier 3 league in the form of the USPHL is, now expanding into Quebec and Ontario. So with that in mind, like, I think that for one thing, like, I could see this being like an opportunity for the USHL and USA Hockey to really like expand their footprint a little bit more, and maybe like in the case of the USHL, expand a little bit farther eastward. Like I think I've said this so many times, and it's especially noteworthy with the OHL having presence in Erie, Pennsylvania, so therefore approximately in the same market. A USHL team, especially with the great turnout for the showcases that they've had there in Pittsburgh or in the Pittsburgh metro area, makes all the sense in the world. So it's time for them to like look at the expansion opportunities a bit more. And I think now is a really good time for the QMJHL to expand back into the United States. eventually it became financially untenable, there might even be some challenges with travel expenses and things like that. But like the Lewiston Maniacs had some really good success on the ice when they were at their peak. So I think with the USPHL, with a much lower baseline and inferior, at least it should be on paper. Of course, we know what that league is capable of. Infrastructure, uh, to be doing the sort of expansion that they're doing, the Q and other entities of that stature don't really have a leg to stand on for them to be sort of inactive and passive. And I think that, like, generally the CHL and USHL should really take this time to have an initiative to really expand the markets that they have like a firm grip on, and maybe like invest more in the ones that they're kind of turning a blind eye to. Like I think this is really like this is the time where like the major players in junior hockey should really be galvanizing themselves, especially like with the conversation evolving consistently about how these leagues' fortunes could very well be changing soon with the CHL NCAA Forbidden Door finally opening. Like things are gonna modernization and these changes in like the competitive environment, et cetera, are happening very fast. And are going to even more. So I'm taking initiative, or at least looking at strongly at what my options are if I'm an executive in any of those environments.
Yeah, makes sense. So I just want to look at last year's women's college season, right, the D1. And Joy Dunn was absolutely phenomenal. She was a freshman for Ohio State. She had 42 points in 39 games, and she led all freshmen in goals and points last year. She also got the WCHA Rookie of the Year. And if you remember, she's the one who scored the game-winning goal in the national title against Wisconsin. So she, like, look at women's hockey, looking at the PWHL in the future. Like, I am so excited to see what she does in the rest of her collegiate career, because to start out in your freshman year, just be that good, and again, the team was loaded, but to score the lone goal to win the Natty in your freshman year is just insane. So I'm excited to see what she's going to do the next couple of years. And I would not be surprised if she made it to the PWHL.
Yeah, my take also PWHL related. Just as I've started putting together my off-season recaps for half the league, something that's definitely a little bit interesting to me, just because it's a little strange. I don't understand the rationale behind it at this point in time. But still a lot of unsigned draft picks with training camp about 2 months out. At the moment, Minnesota only has 17 players under contract, and Brooke McQuigg is currently going to be starting the season over in Moto in the SDHL. I know that Nyla Pearson for New York will also be starting the year in the SDHL before she comes over for the start of the PWHL season, which Alina Mueller did last year. For those who don't know, she was in Europe before the start of the PWHL season in January. With all of that said, though, really fucking bizarre, man, that players are still, including Sarah Fillier, I might add, don't publicly have contract announcements, which is fine, but it's definitely a little bit challenging, I think, from a league optics standpoint for getting media support by withholding this information from, the mainstream media of which players are expected to report to training camp in November. It makes it fairly difficult, I think, for fans and even analysts to kind of do what I do and put together, off-season recaps when, Mae Batherson, who solves a lot of Minnesota's lack of offensive creation from the blue line, isn't under contract yet. Like, did Minnesota fix their problem or not? The fact that I don't know this, I have to write with the assumption that they did, that she will be there, or I have to say, wow, this team has 1 OFD and 5 stay-at-homes. It had a plus minus 0 goal differential last year, and every other team got better at offense. Like, really hard to put these teams into context with one another when information like this isn't readily available to the media and media adjacent bodies. Just odd.
Yep. Yeah. I I feel that. Like, I have enough experience dealing with hypotheticals like that to understand how challenging it can be to actually make a full judgment, especially when it's as important as that. Some quick score updates. Everett is now up 5-2, and they're on the power play again. So we'll see if they grow their lead over Wenatchee. We're approaching the end of the third period in Brandon versus Saskatoon. Brandon is up 6-2. I mean, 6-3. Got my wires crossed there for a second. Let me take a look. Let's see. Pravan Batal with the most recent goal. Let's see. Who we got for multi-point games now? I feel like there are a few. Obviously, Jackson Jacobson having yet another masterclass, as was described before. But right winger Nicholas Johnson, alternate captain as well, 1 goal, 1 assist. And Nolan Flamond as well for Brandon having good showings. This is definitely a game that's primarily been won on the power play for them. However, because you look at the plus minuses, you got guys like Ben Reich, who has 2 assists as well for Saskatoon with a +3. Tyler Parr, 2 goals, +2. Graydon Seatman, 1 goal, +2. So it's a good reminder that a lot of games are determined by things that occur outside of 5v5 hockey. But yeah, that was another fun old time. We're finally getting to a point. So the USHL's competitive games actually start in a matter of just 10 days. So, we're actually getting to the point where we're going to have more things, especially with the KHL already in swing, where we can talk about games that are actually, of competitive consequence and really have meaningful takeaways about where guys are headed. So, we're knocking on the door of when we can, actually have these things have like more of a sense of urgency and impact and things like that. So as good as it's been, it's only going to get better from here. You could maybe finally stop posting your when is it going to be October yet memes, because guess what? If you pay attention to other leagues, there is plenty of other competitive hockey going on. So if I see one more of those boomer posts, I'm just going to drop a link to this podcast right in the comments. I don't care if you ban me from your page for advertising or what. But there are plenty of avenues out there, folks, and some of them even have implications in the NHL. But, for those who are like listening and like learning about these things and engage with them, we really appreciate it. We also are very happy to be participating in the PWHL community and really be engaged with people who are really invested in the women's game too. We really are thankful for the friends and supporters we've made along the way in those endeavors. We'll continue to stay in touch, and we'll be writing, we'll be talking. We'll see you very soon. Take care, everybody. Have a good night.